I want to do this. Okay.
Got
Thank
it.
you. Yes. This meeting is being recorded just in case you all didn't hear that. Okay. I would like some. I'll tell you a little bit about me in a second, but I want to know something about you. I really want, if you can give me not a dissertation, but just a couple of words or a few words or a sentence as to why you took this particular workshop. There's all kinds of things you could do. Why are you here? I've already talked to the Memphis contingent about it. And so I'm curious if you can give me your name and just tell me very, very briefly why you signed up for this particular workshop. Yes.
My name is Fred Coppler from Lauderdale, Florida, community-based connection with the Adam program, Awesome Dad, Awesome Man.
Excuse me, if you want the people to hear, you probably have to give me the microphone.
Because we're virtual and we're live.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, my name is Fred Coppler from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, community-based connection, that Awesome Dad, Awesome Man program. And the reason that I took this course is because weekly we deal with fathers who are going through traumatic experiences. And I feel like the title itself, speaks on a way to kind of feel that void that we're dealing with these fathers.
Good. I like your shirts too.
Thank you. Hope everybody's doing good in the room. My name is Lawrence Johnson. Greetings to the online people. The reason why I took this class is because me, myself, I am a father. And just going through things in life, I've learned by doing this field that it might be some things that you don't even say yourself that you go through. Mm-hmm. So I want to be a better, just navigator of the individual who I work with, so that way I can see the things that they may not be wanting to say.
All right.
Hi, I'm Jerome Kennard. I'm from Juvenile Welfare Board in Clearwater, Florida. The reason why I took this training is because I work in systems improvement, and within all these systems, men have been traditionally left out. So that's that invisible brokenness that have been caused by our system. So that's why I'm taking it.
Good morning, Quinn Howard, Program Manager, Montgomery County Office of Reentry, Dayton, Ohio. And I took this particular workshop because I work with men coming home from the justice system. And most recently, we're seeing more and more men returning back that have done lengthy sentences, returning back to the community. And I definitely don't have the experience in anything with, as far as mental health credentials, but we're noticing that they're having a difficult time with their transition, and we believe that's as a result of the trauma they've experienced, the PTSD as it relates to being incarcerated.
All right, thank you. One more.
I'm Jocelyn, and I'm with the Head Start program in Cleveland. I'm taking this course because we work with the women and children, and we are working to bring fathers into the program. And so many of the men of the children in our program, there's so much trauma. The levels of trauma is huge. And so it's so important for us to start addressing the trauma and the brokenness in the men, so that we can bring them into that family fold, because ultimately we want to see a strong parent connection, whether the parents are together or not.
Good stuff. Okay. Last one.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm Dr. Onanjum Weed, co-founder of the National Fatherhood Education, Healing, and Empowerment Coalition, and all of you invited to become members. And I'm here because the centerpiece of the coalition is creating a place of wellness and health and healing. So actually this workshop speaks directly to that purpose of the healing. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. While I'm doing this, I'm noticing that most of you all are writing. If you go to Hoover, I actually have a handout. They uploaded it to Hoover. So if you want that, I noticed that are we all using Hoover? Okay, right there at the bottom of the workshop, there's a PDF. There's a link for a PDF for the handout. So you can get that there just in case.
Also, quickly, in the back of your books, there's a note page if you wish to take notes on any of the subjects or topics.
Okay? Well, good. So let's just jump in. Good. So let me tell you my story a little bit. Because this what I'm sharing really comes out of my own story. So I like to say my story by the numbers. So one, I have 65 years of being a black man. I worked in a funny story. I used to work for Apple Computer many years ago, and I was in a store, and this lady walked in, and I was helping her, and then about a day or two later, she called back and she says, "I need some help with my computer." And I said, "Well, could you?" I answered the phone. She said, "Could you?" I said, "Could you describe the person?" Well, they had on a shirt and tie. I said, "Okay, that's half of the people here because half are men, and then the tie." So it was a man. I said, "Could you describe him some other kind of way?" Because she couldn't remember the name. She said, he had a really nice tan.
This thing's called.
This ain't a tan, y'all. I'm just saying. This ain't a tan. I'm a black man, all of it. Okay, not some of it, but all of it. So I have 65 years. I'm gonna move this out the way. I have 65 years of being just move it back as far as you can. Thank you. 65 years of being a black man. I have 49 years of processing my own brokenness. My mother's first husband was killed, trying to kill her and my brother. He was an abusive alcoholic and was attempting to, I think it was Christmas Day, he had told her not to buy presents for the children, and she did. She had bought something, couldn't have been much because she wasn't working. And he hit her, and then he hit my brother, and when he hit my brother, she snapped, picked up something and clocked him, ran out the house, ran across the yard, hid in my grandmother's house. He came after her with a shotgun. Somebody happened to be there. They shot him before that. Left her with 6 children, 9 and under, in a community with a median income of $9,000. There's some seats up front, y'all, by the way. And so, in a house with no running water, had a hand pump for water, an outhouse. Y'all know what outhouses are?
Yes, sir.
Okay, outhouse and no heat. Well, 6 kids, 9 and under. And somebody came on checking on Sister Perry, and they checked a little bit too closely, and oops comes Jason. So I was the mistake. And so I come along, and so now my mother has 7 children under, so I think it's at that point probably 12 and under in this situation. And so at 16, but nobody knew who my father was. I don't know how you managed to have an affair with somebody and you got 6 kids. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. Mama was Houdini, okay? And somebody was who did it. So we had, so now this woman has 7 children and nobody knows who the dad is. And on my 16th birthday, my mother said, "This young lady that you're seeing, she can't be your girlfriend." I said, "Why not?" "Because that's your niece." Oh, wow. And it happened to be my pastor's daughter. Wow. So my father was my pastor's father. Wow. And so for the last, so I found that out at 16. Yeah, my father was my pastor. He's trying to figure that out. Listen, we here, we might as well just keep on with the story. So so that was when I was 16, but our families were extremely close. And I made the decision to bury it because it would have destroyed all of our families. And so I just made the decision to bury it. And for the next 35 years, I became extraordinarily skilled at lying and hiding that truth. Even my own children did not know the truth. And but at 50, when I turned 50, and I won't go into the whole story about it, but when I turned 50, I recognized something. Well, I'll give you this piece. Have any of you all, some of you all, if you have any kind of a church background, you might have heard of something called the Year of Jubilee.
Yes.
With the Year of Jubilee, the idea was that every 50 years, you were to release all slaves, release all debt, stuff like that. And what I heard in my own heart was this was my Year of Jubilee.
Yeah.
And I was like, nobody should live a slave for all of their life. Everybody gets a reset. And at that point, I made the decision that I was going to come clean and tell the truth about my dad for the first time in my life. And I set my children down on January 1, told them the truth for the first time. It shifted my life.
Wow.
Again, that story alone could be the whole workshop. But it shifted my life. But here's the next layer. Last summer, I realized that everybody from that generation who knew the truth about my life was dying.
Yeah.
There was one person left in the line of my father. And I went to him, and I knew all of these people. And I went to him, and I said, I need some help. I said, I need to get some clarity about my father. I said, well, he says, how can I help? I said, would you do a DNA test? He said, what do you need? I said, I need you to do a DNA test. He says, well, how? I said, come in my car. I had already ordered the DNA test. They were in the back seat. I said, let's sit and spit and let's go. So we sat and spat, put it in the mail, and about 2 months later, I got my results. And I got the next surprise. It turns out that this young man who I thought was my nephew, the DNA test told me he was my cousin. And when I started doing the charting and writing it out, how can he be my cousin? It turned out that the person who I thought was my brother, who was my pastor, was my father. So I found out that the man I had worked with for 40 years, like this, was actually my father.
Wow.
I've had 49 years of processing the trauma that came with all of that. Because we lived in poverty, and I watched the man who I thought was my father drive past my house every day, every year in a new car. And I worked with this person, and then even my pastor, who was my father, we were like this, but he also probably had the greatest impact on my life, but he also probably had the greatest damage.
My God.
The same person. I am here today because of him, not just physically, but because of what he instilled in me as a man. But he also did the greatest damage to me. Some things that he said to me literally took me until 25 years to heal from.
Wow.
And so what I'm saying to you is that I've been dealing with processing brokenness for 49 years, since I was 16 years old. I was okay up until that. I was okay lying for 16 years.
Right.
But then when I found out the truth, then that lying took on a whole different level, right? Because now I was hiding something that I knew, what I knew. I've also had 49, and 16 was probably the most significant year of my life for a number of reasons. One, because I found out about my father, but two, something else happened when I was 16. I was living with my sister. She became my legal guardian so I could change high schools. And she had a 6-year-old son who didn't know his dad. He had never met his dad. And this 6-year-old boy idolized me. It was my job to take him to school every day. So his first grade was across the street from my high school. So I would drop him off at the school, go to work, go to school, come back, pick him up, and every day I'd pick him up, we'd walk home, and we would go watch Popeye and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That was our deal. That was our gig every single day. He would sit at my feet and would mimic everything that I did, everything, and it drove me nuts. Because even though I'm the youngest of 7, there's 7 years between me and my next brother. I wasn't used to having that kind of attention. Got to the point that I started to hide from him. As soon as his mother walked in, I walked out and I was hiding. One day I was hiding underneath the stairwell in the apartment building, and I heard a voice in my head. I heard him asking Mama, "Where's Uncle Jason?" And she said, "I don't know." I'm like, "I'm hiding from you." That's what I am. And so I stood there, I sat there, and I heard this voice, and I'm going to tell you, for me, it was God. And this is what God said to me. He says, "You have no choice of whether or not Malcolm will follow you. The only choice you have is the example you will give him to follow."
Wow.
Either you will give him an example that you will be proud of, or you will give him an example you will be embarrassed by. Those are your only choices. Changed my life on the spot. From that point on, that little boy was attached to my hip. He went everywhere with me. Even when I went off to college, he went to college with me. And I would take him to college for the weekend. And he would hang out with me, and my friends would get him. And my friends would kidnap him from my room. I wouldn't have any idea where it was. I knew one of my boys had. And after school, I went back and I taught. And he was one of my students. And we would drive 17 miles to go play basketball, because that was the closest basketball hoop to where I told you I lived in poverty. 17 miles from a grocery store. And I went back to that same community after I got out of school. And so that started me on this path of pouring my life into other young men and other men, because I understood what that was like not to have it. And I told him, the only thing I need from you is for you to do to other young men what I did to you. And that's exactly what he's done. And so I have 49 years of doing that. But the last 15 years, 10 years ago, when I made this decision to tell the truth and to reveal about the identity of my father, well, I didn't really, I still don't tell, I don't say his name much. I just choose not to, because it's not really all that important. But when I began to deal with that, I started this process of what I call becoming a wounded healer. And I think that there are a lot of people who are wounded, but there are some people who are wounded, and some people are wounded, but all they're doing is just dripping blood on other people.
Right.
They're still picking scabs.
Right.
They are still, and but I say a wounded healer is a person who walks with a limp to help other people.
Yes.
And so I think that it is important to understand that as men, for the men in your lives, the men in your businesses, for you as a person, male or female, it is okay to have a limp. It is okay to have a wound. But I have a scar right here on my arm. I told you it's right here. I won't take off my shirt and stuff. I want y'all to see my 6-pack. But if I would, there's a scar right here on my arm when I fell on a coal stove when I was 4 years old. And so there's a discoloration and a scar on my arm about this big. When I was 4, that thing hurt like crazy, you know.
Yes.
But at 65 years old, I can talk about it. I can touch it. I can incorporate it into my story. I can tell you stories about it. I can give you lessons from it, but I ain't crying about it. That's healing. Healing does not mean that you don't have scars. Healing means that you have stories. And that you know how to use those stories to help somebody else. Yeah. Okay? And that is the goal, is not to tell people, not to tell men, no, don't talk about that. No, talk about that. But learn how now to let it be a scar in your story, but not an open wound. And I see a lot of people, there's a term that I often use called emotional vomiting. And there's a lot of people who have stories, and they're willing to tell their stories, but they don't know how to tell their stories in a way that it becomes a blessing rather than a bane to other people. If you have a child, and if you've been around people who drink, somebody might have thrown up on you. And when they throw up on you, you know what? They feel better. You know, babies feel a whole lot better. They go, oh, yeah. And you say, but I need a bath. Right? How many people do you know when you hear their story, they feel better, but you need a bath after they leave? That's emotional vomiting. And we have to learn how to be able to share our stories in a way that leads people to hope, not have to get help after they talk.
Right.
Okay? And so that is what it means to become a wounded healer. There's a statement that is attributed to Frederick Douglass that says it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And I agree, but I think we need to take that a step further. We have to heal men who can build boys, or they will continue to create broken children.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yes, ideally, it is better to just simply raise boys. But guess what? Or to raise children. That ain't where we are, y'all. We got a whole bunch of brokenness. As Sister said to me earlier, and listen, our city needs healing. We can't ignore that. That's a reality. So there must be, we must engage in this two-pronged attack. Look at it like this. A train needs what to run on?
Track.
It needs tracks. How many tracks are there? There are 2 rails. Those rails must be both present and parallel.
Yes.
If either one of those things is not true, the train crashes.
Right.
If one of the rails is missing, the train crashes. If one of them gets out of parallel with the other, the train crashes. If you want the train to arrive at its destination, both things must be present and parallel. If we want our communities to arrive at a place of healthiness and healing, we must deal with one track of dealing with the young men and the young children, and the other track of helping men heal from their brokenness. Okay? You cannot do one or the other. There is no silo in this thing. There has to be one or the other. Okay? And again, most of these things are in your handout.
I looked in on the thing, I didn't see that. That's just not.
Okay, did anybody else see it? Because I saw it this morning.
It's there.
No, it's not the, so the PowerPoint is there?
Not the PowerPoint, but the handout.
Oh.
The handout there. Not the
There's a
PowerPoint.
PDF file there, but there's only like 3 things on it there. Pulled up on the thing. So maybe I did the wrong one.
Excuse me, there are some seats down front,
We'll talk about it.
about 5
Right.
places if you like.
So this is what I call my man's mentoring mantra. I say this: boys play, young men prepare, and men perform. But when young men fail to prepare, they become men who continue to play.
I like that.
I see so many men that I work with now in my work that are playing. They're playing because they have not spent the time preparing. They have not learned how to change hoods. They've gone from boyhood and manhood, but they don't know what the heck they're doing in manhood.
Right.
I talked with a young man recently, a few years ago. He came to me for premarital counseling. He and his wife, his girlfriend, they were living together. And after 4 sessions, I said, nope, I ain't married. You don't need to be married to anybody.
Wow.
Either one of you. You're not ready. And one of the reasons was this. She came in one day and said, she was crying. She said, he doesn't come home. He comes home at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he has to be at work at 6.
Wow.
And I said, so why? He says, I'm at my friend's house. At your friend's house doing what? Playing video games. Okay. He was, I said, how old are you? 29. And then he said, I said, why are you at your friend's house playing video games? Now, he also has a 4-year-old son.
Wow.
And I said, why at your friend's house playing video games at 3 o'clock in the morning? He says, because I don't have an Xbox. I said, boy, how old are you? Actually, I said something a little stronger than that. But I said, how old are you? I said, that is the response I expect to get from a 16-year-old, not a 29-year-old man with a wife and child.
Mm.
And then they came, I said, I would do, and they begged me to do the wedding. I said, I'll do it on this one condition, is that you continue the counseling after you get done, after the marriage. They said, okay. They ghosted me entirely. I saw, this was in 2018. I didn't hear from her. This was in October of 2018. I didn't hear from her again until January of 2019. I didn't hear from him again until 2 months ago.
Wow.
Don't even get me talking. If y'all want to hear that story, and take me out to lunch.
Did they get
My
married?
number is 708. But they are, if you could call it, they're still together. But it's together on paper only. He's been to jail twice. He's been on drugs. He was with another woman 2 months after they got married. Living with another woman 2 months after they got married. I told y'all, listen, y'all can eat lunch and dinner for this story. Okay? But this is what I'm saying, is that if we do not help young men prepare, then they become men who continue to play when they're older, okay? And this is part of that preparation, is what they need in order to be able to perform properly in that setting, in that new hood, knowing how to operate there. Okay, I think I just lost me again.
You're good.
Okay, all right. So in order for men who can, in order to be men who can adequately handle the responsibilities of manhood, we have to learn how to be healthy men over all of the stages of the male life stage: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, fatherhood, and beyond. And so that is the key from here all the way to here. How do you become healthy? How do you become healthy? And this is critical for men to learn how to do this. So many men do not learn that in younger stages, and as a result, they live their whole lives in this level of brokenness because they don't know how to do that. Do not always learn how to adjust to those different stages. How do you deal with problems? How do you deal with issues? And so often, I think that one of the things that, now listen, just in case y'all think you might mishear me, I am very much for the mental health. My wife is a psychologist and my daughter is a therapist. Okay? So I believe in therapy. I believe in all of those things. But I also know, and I'm a counselor. Again, I've been doing this for a long time. But there's a fragility in our culture right now because we have begun to tell people, and I'm going to talk about this later, instead of helping them heal, we give them the capacity just to stay where they are and just like, oh, if I tell you something is wrong with you, then I'm judging you.
Uh-huh.
No, some stuff, no, you broke, bro.
Right.
Sis, I'm sorry, you broke. That ain't judging. If I look at an apple,
Mm-hmm.
you got a core, you got red seed. I'm not looking at that could be a banana. No, it's an apple.
No, exactly.
And I got to tell you when you are not operating right. But there's this fragility that we hold on to that I think has become unhealthy in the mental health field. Okay, but that's another topic. But I have found is that I need to be able to learn. We need to be able to help people learn, especially men, at all of these different stages. How to be healthy and how to heal from certain things. So, quick thing, tell me what you see. Just a couple of people. When you see this, tell me what you see.
Is this like kids trapped inside of parents?
Looks like kids trapped inside of parents, okay? Somebody else, tell me what you see.
A desire to connect.
A desire to what?
Connect.
A desire to connect, okay? Miss Memphis.
Oh, I was just gonna say 2 adults, but truly they're stuck in like childhood, I guess you could say, like childhood.
Okay,
Childhood connect. Yeah.
Mr. Donaldson, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I was gonna say this is something like that, a child trapped in a
Adult body.
adult body.
Yeah.
children trapped in an adult body, okay? All right, so here's what I said. Much of the brokenness and the dysfunction that we experience as adults is the result of our inability to nurture and to maintain mental health, mental well-being over a lifetime. Whole lot of times, the stuff that we're dealing with as adults is because of something that happened to us as children. You know, and because we've never dealt with it. You know, so here's one of the. I'm a writer. And well, I don't know if I'm a writer. Okay. And I've written 16 books.
You're a writer.
Okay, I'm a writer. Okay. And so I process life through writing. And I process much of stuff I did through writing. And so when I started this process of my own healing, what I did, I went and took a retreat day. And I sat in the basement and I wrote for 8 hours straight. And I wrote and I cried and I prayed. And I wrote and I cried and I prayed. That's what was my process. And one of the things that I learned, a significant lesson that I learned, there were 2 lessons that I got that I took away from that 15 years ago. The first one was this: you cannot heal until you reveal what's been concealed.
Right.
Okay? Many of us have stuff that's concealed. And it's healed, it's concealed. We don't want anybody to show it. We don't want anybody to see it. We don't want to show it to anybody. But as long as you are hiding the fact that you have cancer, taking an aspirin and a Band-Aid is not going to help. And there were many of us. I had a friend who recently died, and her daughter called me up and she said, you know, Mom died. I was like, died? I didn't even know she was sick. She said, yeah, she had cancer for the last year, but she made me not tell. Nobody could know. And she died, and nobody had any idea she was even sick. Her daughter, imagine her daughter. Her daughter lived with this secret for a year, taking care of her mother, but her mother made her swear to secrecy. See, there's a lot of times we have stuff, but it's hidden. We don't want to take it out because we're embarrassed. Pride, anger, embarrassment, weakness, whatever reasons we may use, we hide stuff. And a lot of that stuff is childhood trauma. A lot of it is childhood trauma, but not all of it is. But we just need to recognize it. This is from an article on exploring the inner child trauma of Black men. It says, on one hand, Black men and boys are traumatized constantly, but on the other hand, we are not given emotional tools to transform that pain. We are taught masculine norms that do not support mental health. Okay, it's not always, but again, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit later too. But this is something that we must learn how to heal over periods of time. So, what is trauma, and how do we respond to it? Here's the definition. It said trauma is the result of physical, emotional, and/or physical pain that haunts a person through life rather than being contained to a specific moment in time. In short, trauma is the result of being haunted or perpetually stuck in a moment of pain. Do we have any veterans here? Okay. I have my brother is a Vietnam veteran. And I just remember the very first time he came home, we were on the lawn taking a picture. He was in his uniform, and this was during the time, my brother's 76, I think 77. And I remember at that time, cars had carburetors. You know, in my carburetors, cars backfired.
Yeah,
okay?
yes, sir.
We were standing on the lawn taking a picture. A car drove past and backfired, and the next thing we know, he was gone. He was lying flat on the ground. I talk to veterans, some friends right now, some good friends, and they tell me the worst time of the year for them is the 4th of July. They said they try to figure out ways that they can get someplace where they don't hear anything. They tell me they're still traumatized by German Shepherds. German Shepherds traumatized them because they had the tunnels. In Vietnam, a lot of the war was fought in tunnels because that's how the Vietnamese, they create these tunnels. And these tunnels were very narrow, but often what they would do, they would put dogs into those tunnels and then they'd come after the soldiers that were in there. So for a Vietnam veteran, seeing this dog is traumatizing. and it takes them right back. Not like it happened yesterday, it is like it happened right now. That's what PTSD is right now, okay? And so when we look at this trauma, how do we respond to it? So trauma is simply adverse events. So we talk about the adverse events, and so trauma is the emotional response to those adverse events, okay? Now there's unhealthy responses and there are healthy responses. Unhealthy response would be to ignore it, to be traumatized by it, and then to be re-traumatized when you come into that situation again, or a similar situation. A healthy response is to confront it, to seek healing from it, and to build resilience. And that's where we're going to go from here. So look at this. What are some traumas men of color experience over a lifetime? So we talked about these adverse events. So historical, slavery, Jim Crow, violence, lynching, KKK. This picture I find to be one of the most traumatic pictures in my life. Why do I have to have a sign up to tell you that I'm a man? The very fact that I have to tell you that I have to march for you to see it, that I have to put a sign up for you to, that in and of itself is traumatic.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, was this in Memphis?
Yeah.
Yes. I just thought about that.
Yes.
So here it is. So this is trauma, just in and of itself. So this is just some historical facts about that. What about some community?
One thing missing from there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's incarceration.
Yes. Well, no, I think I'm coming to that.
Oh,
That's, but this is, but that ain't historical.
Right?
That's
Present day.
Ongoing. You see what I'm saying? I'm just talking about some of the historical. For the most part, these things are not happening right now. For the most part. Okay. Jim Crow is still happening, but it's just
The
a
new
little
Jim
bit
Crow.
different. Okay, got a little bit different clothes on it right now.
James Crow.
Yes, James Crow. Esquire. Okay. So look at community. Gun homicide rate for black males is 20 times higher than for white males. We all know, this picture. Well, I've heard someone talking last night about this school to prison pipeline. You look at those things. These are community factors that are traumatizing. Okay. Family issues, messages that we get from the big boys don't cry. When I told you I'm 65 years old. I've never called a man daddy in my life.
Wow.
And the only man that was in my life was Unc. And I didn't know Unc was my great uncle. I didn't know that wasn't his name until the funeral.
Oh my
I thought that was his name. And they said, well, we're here to memorialize Albert Hawkins. I was like, who? Did we come into the wrong spot? What are you talking about? Who is Albert Hawkins? I was like, oh, that's Unc. It's like, Unc is for uncle. I didn't know that. I was 6 years old, And so, but at the funeral, my tough guy brother, who at 4 years old witnessed his father being killed. That's my mother was
right.
My brother was 4 years old at the window and saw his father being killed. And he told me later, he said, I made the decision at that point that I will never obey and follow anybody else. And he spent probably the next 30 years being a resident in all of the public hotels in the state of Illinois. Other, we got meals, 3 meals a day, and a cot. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Homeboy did everything but gangbang. Everything. But then turned his life around. He owns his own construction company now. But it was, I sat next to him. They let him out of jail to come to the funeral. He sat next to me. And when he sat next to me, and keep me on time because I need more time, I guess. He sat next to me, and I started to cry for the only man in my life. And he said, big boys don't cry. I was 10 years old. I said 6. I was 10. I was 10 years old at the time. I didn't shed another tear for the next 13 years.
My God.
Not another tear. Because he told me big boys don't cry. How many men get that message? Okay? We are told, be a man. Man up. Okay, but what does that mean? Man up. Absent fathers, wounded mothers. All of those things and the impact upon young people and over their lifetime in terms of how does that impact? Those are adverse events. Here's a quote from, again, that same article I mentioned already. Says, when he would yell at my mother, I would start crying. I didn't know any better. I was only 6. As soon as I started sniffling, he would turn around and scream, "Shut up, Sean. Don't be an effing punk." I was so scared. I was scared he would hate me like I thought he hated my mother. I learned that from that to shut up whatever feeling I was going through. Back then, it was fighting other kids. As I got older, I would drink, smoke, or just zone out. Years later, being with my own kids made me realize something was wrong. I was angry all the time. I started to see that I had been doing something that was pushing me away from the people I cared about. Again, trauma, and sometimes people don't even know where it's from. They just know they're reacting. And one of the things about trauma-informed work is that very, very important question. I think I'm going to come to this later, but let me just say it right now. We often ask the question, I am going to come to it later. We often ask the question of people, what's wrong with you?
All right. Mm-hmm.
We ask, what's wrong with you? When I ask you what's wrong with you, you know what it immediately does? It puts you into a defensive position.
Yes.
Because now I have to defend myself.
Right.
The proper question should be, what happened?
Right.
And this guy is looking at what's wrong with you. Everybody's probably saying, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? But they didn't ask what happened to you.
Yes.
Okay? I had a lady I was counseling, my wife and I were counseling a couple, and this lady came to us and she said, I think I'm gonna get a divorce. I'm gonna leave my husband. We said, why? She said, because he yelled at me. I said, okay. I said, so he hit you? No. He cursed at you? No. And we went through all of these things. I said, so he yelled at you, and that means you want to get a divorce? Yes. And I looked at her, and the room went quiet. I said, what happened to you? She said, nothing happened to me. I let the room go quiet again. I said, what happened to you? Nothing. I let the room stay silent. And then she said, when I was 4, my father used to beat my mother.
My God.
And it was my job when he started beating my mother to run to the neighbor next door to call the police. But I was too small to get to the handle to open the door. And so I would just have to watch him beat my mother. And she said, I realized that yelling was the precursor to physical violence.
My mind.
So therefore, him yelling at me triggered me. I can't be yelled at because that means you're going to hit me next. She's willing to throw away her marriage because he yelled at her.
You're at the 30-minute mark, sir.
30 minutes?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Okay. I want to leave about 15, 20 minutes for questions.
Okay, I'll let you know in
Okay?
15, yes, sir.
Yeah. And so you see what I'm saying? Very often the stuff that we see manifested in our adult lives is the result of things that have happened in our younger lives.
Yes.
That we have never, ever dealt with. Okay? Another thing, this message is from society. Toxic masculinity. Okay, so let me say something about toxic masculinity, and I'm hoping I don't get myself. No, I don't care if I get myself.
I got your back.
I'm gonna say it. I was speaking at a conference, at a men's conference here in DC several years ago. I was on a panel. I would be interested if any of you all were in that room. I was on this panel. I think Andre Perry was moderating the panel, and lady stood up in the room, and she said, "Can you speak to toxic masculinity? Can you talk about that?" In the room went, ah. And so the man next to me on the panel next to me, he started talking. He said, "Yeah, masculinity is broken. And he just started talking about all these things about toxic masculinity. And I did something, I know I shouldn't have done it, but I did it.
I know.
I reached over and I took his mic, and I took his mic from him, and I pushed his mic down. I said, no, bro, you can't say that. Masculinity is not broken.
Yeah.
I said, here's the problem. I said, our definitions of masculinity are broken.
Yes.
If you say masculinity is broken, there's only two options: masculinity and femininity.
Right.
I ain't feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you tell me masculinity is broken, you're telling me fundamentally as a man, something is wrong with me just because I am a man.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I said, when we start telling our little boys that, there's a problem. When we start telling our girls that, there's a problem.
Yes.
And so the problem is not toxic masculinity. The problem is not masculinity itself. And again, this is a whole workshop in and of itself. How we define masculinity is what creates the problems.
Right.
And we have to look at that carefully. We have to pay attention to those things, okay? Again, whole other topic. Jason Wilson, some of you all might know the name Jason Wilson. We met several years ago, and I love this in his book, Cry Like a Man. It talks about trauma. It says it's not always physical. I think emotional pain can often be more damage, can do more damage. Many times, bodily scars heal almost as good as new. A hairline scar or bruised tissue can easily be overlooked, but it's the mental wounds that dig the deepest, rip the lining from our hope, and hinder our healing. How many of you all, as little kids, have heard the statement, "Sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never, they break my bones, but words will never harm me"? That's a lie.
Yes, it is.
From the pit.
It's a lie from the pit.
For real.
You know why? Because you can heal broken bones.
Yeah, you can.
The damage that is done by the power of our words sometimes cannot be healed or taken significantly longer. Listen, I got a scar that was healed, but the mental wound, I can go back. I'm writing a curriculum now called Adam, You're Born to Lead, Now Learn How.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back on the trauma. Actually, no, I'm sorry, that's from something different. Another piece that I'm working on is Dad's Plus. And I'm talking about the fact that I began to process how my father's words impacted me. And I had a list this long of ways that it impacted me. Jobs that I had turned down, systems of inadequacy. Imposter syndrome. Walking into a room like, well, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I shouldn't be here. Who am I? All of that came from his negative words. Okay? And so understand the power of those words. So some of the unhealthy responses, natural response to stress or trauma: fight, flight, freeze. They've added another one not called fawn. I don't like it. That's why I use that. Okay, but they call it fight, flight, or freeze. What's flight? Fight. Avoidance. For many men, their sense of inadequacy overrides their sense of responsibility. Okay? I told y'all there were two major things that I learned in my process. The first one was you cannot heal until you reveal what's been concealed. This is the second one. For many men, their sense of responsibility overrides, the sense of inadequacy overrides their sense of responsibility. It feels significantly worse to be inadequate than it does to be irresponsible. Okay? That's a whole topic in and of itself, but avoidance, that whole flight piece. Aggression. How do you respond to threats? I put out the question on Hoover, how do you see brokenness manifested in men's lives? And this is, I saw a lot of people talk about the aggression, the violence and things like that. And the violence is not a sign of toxic masculinity, it's a sign of broken people. But that is not necessarily the definition of not all men are that way. Okay? So you can't just say, oh, masculinity is toxic. That particular expression of that man in response to his stuff is toxic. But don't say all men are that because of that. That's like saying all women are this because you had that experience. Or all people are this because you had that experience. Okay? inaction, the paralysis from being overwhelmed. Some people look at all of their circumstances because it's just too much. It's just too much. I don't even know what to do. You ever had that experience? You have so much to do, you don't even know where to start. You know, and some folks just can't, they don't know how to. Again, it's because they have not learned how to manage emotions. They have not learned how to manage difficulties over their life. Now they move into adulthood, they move into this new hood, and you haven't learned how to do certain things because you haven't learned in this look. When my children were 6th grade in high school, I got tired of them asking me for money all the time. So we took them off of an allowance and we put them on a budget. And the budget was, you have to sit down and tell us how much money you need for the month. And they had to come up with a budget, and they had to present it to the board of directors. Me and my wife was the board of directors, and the finance managers and the CFOs and everything else. And then we look, no, we can do this. No, we can do this. You can increase this. You need to, no, please. You know, all of that stuff. And then we gave them that money at the beginning of the month and said, we will see you in 30 days. And we did not give them another dime the rest of the month. My daughter was out of money in 2 weeks. My son was making Washington cry at the end of 30 days. He was holding on so too tight. And they said, Daddy, I don't like this. I want to go back on the allowance. I said, nope, I need to teach you how to manage your money now when it doesn't cost you anything.
Mama.
Guess what? Now, I said in 10 years, in 15 years, when you have a credit score over 800 and you own your own house, you will love me. You will hate me right now. You will love me then. I'm willing to wait. My son bought his first house at 23. My daughter bought her house at 27.
I love it.
Okay? Why? Because I taught them something when they were younger, and that now, but when they were older, now they understand certain things. We have to teach certain things when kids are younger in those times when we are preparing them for that next phase, for manhood, for womanhood. Okay? So let's get to this, because I know I'm getting close to my time. And if you got questions, I hope you have them, because if y'all have questions, I'm going to keep talking. So y'all better get answers. So here's a healthy response. What is that? I talk about an unhealthy response. What are some healthy responses if we're going to deal with trauma? First thing is to confront. You must confront things. You have to acknowledge the reality of stress, of hurt, of pain, the pain of dysfunction. You must acknowledge that. You can't say, oh, I'm too good. You ever heard, say, if any of y'all been in church, you've been around people, how you doing? Oh, I'm too blessed to be stressed.
Yeah.
What kind of foolish lies? If you said it, I'm sorry. You all did it wrong.
You get the
There ain't no
sad
plan.
You get the sad time.
Yeah, that's right. You know what? No, some stuff, you just got to be able to say, no, I'm hurting today. I'm hurting today, okay? I'm dealing with this. So anyhow, so you need to acknowledge that there's a reality. It's okay to say I'm sad. It's okay to say I'm scared. It's okay. Me and Ken Harris were sitting up late last night. Ken and I are very good friends, and we were talking about some things that we have been looking at doing together probably for the last 10, maybe 12 years. And now they're starting to come to fruition. And I'm like, dang, this is big. What am I going to do with this? I said, Ken, you know what? I said, I might be a little scared of this. And he said, you better stop faking. Stop talking about you might be. You are scared. You see what I'm saying? You got to acknowledge it. Now, that's what I love about our relationship. He's not going to let me blow no smoke. I ain't going to let him blow smoke. No, I'm scared. I don't know what to do with this. But what are we going to do? You have to acknowledge it, because, again, you cannot heal until you reveal what's been concealed. You have to deal with that stuff in your life, and you have to help those men and the people in your life learn how to deal with those things. Confront them. Confront them. You know, those things that you are afraid of, you must learn to confront them. When I was little, I had a brother. I have 6 older siblings. I had one brother that I think that his contribution to the world is that he is a gifted liar. He's in the gifted and talented school for life. And he could convince me of anything. So he convinced me that There was a woman living in the medicine cabinet in our bathroom.
Oh, my.
And he
That's a
told me
fantasy.
that if Mary Worth was her name, she had a name. Her name was Mary Worth. And he told me if you go into the bathroom at night in the dark, or in the dark period, if you start to say Mary Worth, Mary Worth, Mary Worth, she will come out of the bathroom. She will come out of the thing. So I went in the bathroom one day. I was like, I ain't scared. And so I went in the bathroom and I stood there and I went, Mary Worth, Mary Worth, Mary Worth. And I swore somebody came out of the medicine cabinet. I swore it. It was years, y'all, years before I would go into that bathroom again.
My mind.
Without turning on the light. And for one day I said, I gotta face this. So I went in the bathroom, I bucked it up. I manned up. And I went in the bathroom and I said, Mary Worth, Mary Worth, Mary Worth. And nobody came out. I was like, okay, I'm good. But y'all want to know the truth? I'm 65 years old. You know what I still do? I'm just telling y'all the truth. I still always turn on the light before I go in the room.
You don't step in. So
I was thinking about it last night.
Mary,
I still walk into the room and I go, I'm always looking for the light. But again, you must confront those things that you are afraid of. The boogeyman. My son used to come into the room and he would say, because our kids never slept in the bed with us, ever.
Gotcha.
Even as nursing children, there was a bassinet, nurse, get back in the bed. So my son would try it. He'd be 2 years old, and I'd hear him in the middle of the night and come in. I look over the little chubby leg trying to climb up in the bed. I had a bad dream, and I said, "Okay, let's go upstairs and let's find the monster." Let's go check. Let's check under the bed. I was like, "Ain't nothing there." Okay, let's pray. Let's talk. But you ain't getting in my bed, bro. That ain't happening. There's very sacred. Your name ain't on it. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I had to help him confront those things.
Yes.
Otherwise, they become bigger and bigger and bigger.
15 minute mark.
15 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Real quick. Another big part about confront is to embrace. Accept the good, the bad, and the ugly that are shapers of your character and identity. I help them understand that what describes you does not have to define you.
Yes.
What defines you is what you do with what describes you. Yes, I am a 65-year-old man that has never called a man daddy. That describes me. It does not define who I am.
Amen.
It does not define who I am. It describes me, but it does not define me. My whole character is not shaped. Oh, nobody knows the trouble I see. No, that's no. There's some stuff, it describes you, but it does not have to define you.
Right.
You must take control of those things. And then the other thing about confront is to assess. And I mentioned this already. I don't need to talk about this a whole lot. But instead of saying what's wrong with me, ask what happened to me. What do I mean by start picking fruit? Stop picking fruits and start digging roots. I have an apple tree in my backyard. Let's say I don't want apples. I want oranges. Okay? So I look at that apple tree and I go, I don't want apple trees. I want oranges. So what can I do? I can ignore the apples in my apple tree and I can let them all fall to the ground and ignore it. And guess what? I don't have on that tree anymore. Apples. I still ain't got oranges.
Mm-hmm.
The next year I come back and I can say, oh, wait a minute. I don't want those. I want oranges. I can hire somebody to pick them. I can ask my neighbors to come get them. And guess what? I don't have apples anymore.
You still
I still don't have oranges either. I know what. I want oranges. The next year, my apple tree comes out, and I spray paint my tree orange. I got apples. I got oranges now, right? No, you got orange lips. There's only one way for me to get oranges. Dig up the tree or plant another one. Mm-hmm. We spend way too much time, you all, picking fruits, looking at the manifestation of the problems rather than dealing with the root of the problem itself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay? Way too much time dealing with the manifestations, not dealing with the roots. You got to start in confronting issues. You got to start digging roots. Second thing, heal. Stop fighting against yourself and start fighting for yourself. You must recognize that I am worth fighting for. I tell my daughter all the time, who's now 30, and I've been telling her this since she was 17 years old. She had this boyfriend that I thought he was great until I began to know a couple of things about him, and there was a red flag for me. He was a little bit too controlling for me. And I remember she called me up one day, and I was sitting in the library, and I went up to the stacks. I remember this clearly, and I was sitting in the stacks talking really quietly to my baby girl, my singular, my prized possession.
Yes.
And I said to her, baby, let me tell you something. In your search for love, do not lose yourself, because there is not a man on the face of the earth, including your beloved daddy, who is worth losing yourself over.
My mind.
You are apple pie.
Yes.
You don't need ice cream. You don't need whipped cream. You don't need anything else to make you great.
Yes.
Those things may add to you, but I need to know you. You need to know you are apple pie and you are worth it.
Yes.
You need to know that. And as men, we have to help these men understand you are worth it. You have value. Or as they say in that great philosophical film, The Help, you is smart, and you is kind, and you is important. We gotta help those guys understand that, okay? All right. There's a big, but if you look at when you get your handout, I have put QR codes all over that handout to add extra stuff for you. There's a video here that I could not figure out how to put into the presentation, but it's called John Henryism. If you get a chance, look at that, okay? But the QR code, this is the thing, but I put that here as a place marker. That's why it's so small. But look it up, and if you look at the QR code, if you click on it, you will see a really, really good video about the concept of John Henryism. I want to talk about it because I'm running out of time. I need to leave space. Oh, there you go. Okay. Heal. Expand your toolbox of crayons. Y'all remember when you was in little school and you had the 8 box of crayons?
Oh,
Y'all
yeah.
remember that?
Yes, sir.
You know, you had all the colors, but you only used 7 of them. Didn't nobody color with the white. Okay. But then you remember the day when somebody came to school with the 8 box? You thought they was rich. And I was 64. I was confused. How is there 7 shades of blue? It's only one blue. There ain't no teal and aquamarine. What are you talking about? Just blue. Right? And so, but as men, one of the things we have to learn is how to expand our toolbox of emotions. I'm not saying, oh, I need you to get in touch with your feminine side. I ain't got no feminine side. I ain't got no feminine side. I'm just male. That's negative. That's not misogynistic. I am a man, and I express myself as a man, but that does not mean that I cannot have a wide range of emotions.
There you go. Amen.
Okay, that does not diminish your manhood. One of the things we look at this is that we have one expression of anger, but that anger may be representing what may look like anger may actually be worry. It could be embarrassment. It could be jealousy. It could be hurt, anxiety, shame. What is that?
Despondency.
Fear, frustration. It could be any of those different things, but it may only look like anger. And we got to learn. I can express these different emotions. I need to be able to do that. Okay, last couple of things. Seek healing, not dealing. Too much of what we see now is that we are telling people how to cope rather than how to heal. Okay? You need to cut the string to set yourself free from something that is binding and controlling you. What is the mindset? What is the experience? What is the memory? What is the belief set? What is that thing that you are holding on to that is keeping you from running the race that you have been given to run? What is that? What is that? So you have to find, and it may be a person. It may be somebody might need to get traded. Somebody needs to get benched. Some people shouldn't be starting in your life.
That's right.
You might need to trade, bench, You can't kill them, but you might need to get rid of them in some kind of way, all right? Wave them. They need to get waved. They need to be yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get it, exactly. Okay, I ain't talking about the spot. I ain't said that. But you need to recognize those things. Too often we build couches in our dysfunction rather than ladders because we become resigned, settled, or satisfied. You got to build ladders for yourself and for other people. For yourself to leave that dysfunction, but also it's a mechanism for you to come back and help somebody else, but also to give them mechanisms to get out themselves.
There you go.
Okay? We got to stop telling people it's okay to be broken. No, you are broken, but that don't mean you got to stay there.
There you go.
Okay?
7 minutes.
Yeah, last thing. All right. Build resilience. Develop tools for healthy responses for dealing with stress and trauma that will build what I call bounce back ability. Okay, your capacity to resist re-traumatization. If every time you hear this word, it triggers you, you haven't built resilience yet. Okay? How do you build that? Healthy eating, exercise, plenty of hydration, those things just in terms of your physical capacity. A lot of us are not healthy physically, therefore we get re-traumatized very easily. Okay? But then also counseling. Is often saying this, when you're stuck, it's hard to push and drive at the same time. Now, for some of y'all, if you grew up in the north, then you understand about being stuck in snow. Maybe in the south, you get stuck in mud. I don't know what y'all get stuck in. Outside, I know in Florida, it's just called heat. It's called, you get stuck in that humidity, yeah. So, because I feel like I'm stuck. I'm walking backwards. But counseling is important. Therapy is important, and it does not diminish you as a person, okay? Community. Too many of us live in the cave. Isolate. Too many of us live in the cave. But we have to recognize that there is healing that comes from being around other people, being able to talk to other people, being able to share, be able to create those safe spaces. By Gatekeepers Group, we say our mantra is men committed to learning with other men, from other men, how to be better men, husbands, and fathers.
Yes.
Okay? It's creating that safe space, and I have to lead the way in terms of creating that safe space, and even sharing my own story, my own vulnerability.
Yes.
Because they got to know it's okay, and that your vulnerability will not be weaponized. And it also helps you to resist when you see those same things again. You're not re-traumatized. You're not re-triggered.
Right.
Because you built up the resistance against those things. And then faith is another way. Listen, that's my story. Okay, my faith is what gives me strength to be able to heal from certain things. And so, what is your faith? That is also another way. Okay. So again, we want men to become wounded healers because somebody needs their story. Somebody needs their story. Because people go into that cloud of darkness, that cloud of depression, that cloud of sadness, and then they get overwhelmed. But see, you've been through that, and then you came out on the other side. There are people that are in it that don't know that there's another side. That's why you got to build ladders to go back into that. And then show them, no, there's still sun on the other side of the cloud. Y'all got 5 minutes to ask me questions.
More like 3, but that's okay. We'll go 5.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes. I want to return to the comments about toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I think particularly in cultures of patriarchy, the concept that men hold all the power, influence, property, so on, negatively impacts women overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I'm trying to focus on the topic of fatherhood, masculinity, I'm also hoping to repair the dynamic between wounded mothers, wounded women, and also the harm men cause in these dynamics. How do you think we should approach a violent man, so to speak, when working to repair that harm?
I think that again, I'm still not going to call masculinity toxic.
Right.
It's still the definitions.
Right.
And so therefore, I'm going to simply help him to begin to understand, I need you to begin to think differently about what you need to do as a man to express yourself. I need you to think differently about how you value this person. This is not property, this is a person. And I think that as you begin to evaluate your thinking, evaluate mindsets, and evaluate belief systems, evaluate what have you been taught? Is it accurate? Just because it is your history does not mean that it's accurate.
Right.
And so therefore, I think that, again, evaluating definitions, because that man is operating out of a definition.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, I think you have to help him to begin to evaluate those definitions and to go, is that really the best way to handle that? I can think about this coming from in the Black community. Man, you didn't get spankings. You got whoopings. You got beat. My mama would have been in jail today.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? It goes all the way back to slavery. That's how you were kept in line. You got beat. And so that was passed down. Somebody has to break. So listen, there is no such thing as generational curses.
Amen.
It's only generational habits, observed and adopted patterns of behavior that can be changed with intentionality. So I think that for a man, as I'm dealing with that, I'm not going to just talk about his behavior. I got to talk about his mindset and what is your belief system. That is how I would begin to address that. That's the fruit. That's the root. His violence is a fruit. His mindset is the root. You have to change that in terms of definitions. Okay, I think, yes.
So, I was trying to quote it exactly, what you're dealing with, understanding about healing, you have to reveal what's concealed. So what do you mean about revealing?
I think it's just confronting. I think sometimes, for me, I have to be able to say to my children, no, I do know who my dad is. I've been lying to you all for years. I need to say that. Some things you just got to say it.
Right.
Some things you got to say, yeah, I was abused. Revealing could be a number of different things, but I think sometimes you just got to say it. Sometimes you got to pull the cover off of it. I think about my family. We have a Zoom call. We started in COVID. We started in 2020. We meet every single Monday since 2020 on a Zoom call, every Monday. And I cannot tell you how much healing has happened. I told you about my father, my mother's first husband being killed. This was in 1956. Do you know it was in 2020 was the first time they had ever talked about it as a family?
Oh my God.
And we went through, what's your issues? We went from top to bottom, and everybody had a week. What questions do you have? There was a revelation. My siblings did not know who my father was until 2020.
My God.
That's what I mean by healing. I'm not revealing. Some stuff you just got to pull the cover off. Some stuff you just got to tell the truth. Some stuff you just got to be able to call it out and say, this is what it is.
Can we have a hand for our speaker, please?
Absolutely.
Mr. Perry, you have books available on this thing?
Yes, I'm a vendor out there. You might have seen that big old head out there. The Dance and Diamonds is my curriculum for your fatherhood work. So stop and talk to me, and we can go from there. Thank you so much, Bible.
All right, let's have a hand. Thank you all for attending.